Okay, good morning, guys. Today's lesson objectives are written here on the board. Please take a moment, write them down, and let us begin. Today, we're going to be talking about special right triangles. We are going to discuss the first one is the 30-16-90. And the 30-16-90 triangle comes from the equilateral triangle. You may recall that an equilateral triangle is an isosceles triangle where all sides are congruent. Well, if all sides are congruent, that means that we could mark it this way. Okay, we could say this one, and these ones are congruent. Okay, so let's say we draw the altitude to this triangle. If we draw the altitude to this triangle, it would look something like this. Now, remember, if we draw the altitude of an isosceles triangle, it is actually an angle bisector, or it cuts the angle in half, or the vertex angle in half, so that these two angles right here are congruent. You may recall that in an equilateral triangle, all angles measure 60 degrees. So let's mark that here. 60 degrees. And the top one is 60 degrees, but if you draw the altitude being an angle bisector, then it cuts the angle in half. Therefore, the first half would measure 30 degrees and the other half also would measure 30 degrees. Okay, so let's say that is the altitude. Remember, the altitude is perpendicular to the base. It's perpendicular, that means it's a right angle. So then we have a right triangle, or two right triangles, correct? Suppose that this one right here, this side of the triangle measures, let's say 4, just to make it even. Let's say measure 4, this one over here measures 4, and the bottom, of course, being equilateral, also measures 4. Well, remember that on an isosceles triangle, if it's the altitude is not only angle bisector, but is also a perpendicular bisector to the base. That means it cuts the base in half. So if the whole side measures 4, then each half would measure 2. So my question to you now is, what would be the altitude length? What would be the altitude length? Well, we could figure that out. What we learned last lesson, we used the Pythagorean theorem, right? If we say this is right here one of the legs, this would be one of the legs, and then this would be the hypotenuse for this right triangle over here, okay? So we have that the hypotenuse is 4, one of the legs is 2, and we have something, the other leg, that's what we're looking for, so I'm going to mark that with X. Okay, so we have that 2 squared plus x squared is equal 4 squared. That means that we have that 4 plus x squared equals 16. Correct? So now, if we want to get rid of this 4 to isolate the x, we would have that x squared is equal 16 minus 4. That means that x squared would equal 12. Take a look at that. Now, to get rid of the square, we square root both sides. So the square root of x squared being a perfect square, and the square root of 12. The square root of x squared is x, while the square root of 12, well, we know that 12 is the same thing as the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. Thus 4 times 3 is 12. Well, notice now that x, 4 being a perfect square, the square root of 4 is 2 square root of 3. So that's the exact number for that altitude. That means that the altitude would measure 2 square root of 3. Wow. Keep that in mind as we study forward. And what's happening here, if you notice, for this is the hypotenuse, Notice the short leg is half of that hypotenuse. Notice the short leg right here. We have a short leg, and a long leg for this right triangle is half of the hypotenuse, while the long leg is whatever that short leg is times the square root of 3. I wonder if there's something to that. Well, we'll find out as we continue on. So let's take a look at half of that equilateral triangle. Notice that I know it's half because, again, this is 60 and this is 30, so that means the other part of the triangle will be down here. So this is half of it. So that's what we're studying. Notice we have the hypotenuse being 10 and the short leg being 5, which is still half of that hypotenuse. Notice that. So I wonder what would happen. What would this long leg would be? Well, if we use the Pythagorean theorem again, we are going to say, well, let's see. That means, let's make that x. That means that x squared plus 5 squared, that would equal 10 squared. That means x squared plus 25 equals 100. That means that x squared is equal 100 minus 25. Well, 100 minus 25 is 75, so that means x squared equals 75. And if I take the square root of x squared to get the x by itself, I have to take the square root of 75. Now notice this is x, and the square root of 75 can be broken into two. That one perfect square, which is 25 times 3. So the square root of 25 times the square root of 3 is the same thing as the square root of 75. Wouldn't you agree? Now take a look. So that means x is equal, what is the square root of 25? Well, that is 5. And then the square root of 3 is just an irrational number. So that means x is 5, the square root of 3. Notice that the same thing happened as before. So the short leg over here is half the hypotenuse, and the long leg is whatever the short leg is times the square root of 3. Well, let's take another one. Let's make this x again. Again, we have the 60 and the 30 over here, or 30, 60, 90. I'm noticing the same pattern. Notice the short leg is half of the hypotenuse. Wonder if the same thing will happen. Well, can we predict that then this long leg would be 4 square root of 3? Well, let's see. Let's see if that is true. I'm asking myself, would this be 4 square root of 3? Since it happened here and it happened before. So if we take x squared plus 4 squared equals 8 squared. X squared plus 16 equals 64. Well, that means that x squared is equal 64. Write that better. Minus 16. Okay, so that x squared equals, well, 14 minus 6, that's 8, and 5 minus 1, that's 4, that's 48. So we have that x squared, so what right here? The square root of x squared equals the square root of 48. Well, if you break these apart, you may remember that 16 times 3, I think, is 48. Let's see. That means x is the same as the square root of 16 times the square root of 3. 3 times 6 is 18. 3 times 1 is 3, and 1, 4. That's 48. See that? So the square root of 16 is 4, and then the square root of 3 remains. So notice it is 4 square root of 3. Wow, I think we have a rule here. So, what can we conclude? that if you have a 30, 60, 90 triangle, it has the following relationship. It's a 1 to 2 ratio from the short leg to the hypotenuse. That means the hypotenuse is double whatever the short leg is, and then the long leg is whatever the short leg is times the square root of 3. So here is my pattern. Here's my pattern. When you look at the formula chart, you will see that. You will see that 30, 60, 90. And if across from 30, you have 1. Across from 60, you have the square root of 3. And across from 90, you have 2. Okay, and that's your basic in your formula chart. That is your basic the way they write it down. So take a note of that, and I'm going to show you how to use that. Another way we can write this is that we could say, well, this right here is x. This right here would be x times the square root of 3, and this one would be 2x. So probably you either see it this way on the formula chart or you'll see it this way. Either way, it's nice to see. Take a look. Let's take a look at this example. Here they give me the short leg. If they give me the one across from the 30 degrees, that means down here I have x. So x is to 4, you see? And then across from 60 we have k. Well, across from 60 we have x square root of 3. So k is the same as x times the square root of 3. Since x is equals 4, then k must be equal 4 times the square root of 3. See how that works? Since I already know what x is, x equals 4, then k must be 4 times the square root of 3. And m right here should be 2 times x. Well, 2 times x is 2 times 4. And 2 times 4 is 8. So that means m is 8. K is 4 square root of 3. So now I have my answers, you see. M equals 8, while K is equal 4 square root of 3. Let me do that again for you. Notice how I started. I took a look at my formula. So 30 is x right here. So across from the 30-degree angle, which is right up here, across from that is x. So that means x equals 4. Across from the 60-degree angle, we have x square root of 3. So k is equal whatever x is times the square root of 3. Therefore, since x is 4, then k must be 4 square root of 3. How about m? Well, m is across from the 90-degree angle. So since this is across from the 90-degree angle, we have that is equal to x. That means it's 2 times 4, which is 8. So that means m is equal 8 and k is equal 4 square root of 3. So knowing the special right triangle rules will help me a lot at solve right triangles. So this is a pretty straightforward method, but let me show you another method. It may remind you from last lesson, okay? Let's say you, instead of using this one right here, which is the one I just used right here, we're going to use this one right here. In reality, is this. What you're comparing are similar triangles. Notice that since you have similar triangles, then you have a 30, 60, 90. By angle, those are similar triangles. So we could compare corresponding parts. So 4, which is right here, corresponds to 1. So 4 is to 1. 4 is to 1 as m is to 2. Now notice you cross multiply, so m equals 8. So that means m is 8. And if you're going to do k, right, you could say 4 is to 1. Let me erase this one. As k is to the square root of 3. As k is to the square root of 3. So now we cross multiply and we have that k is equal 4 times the square root of 3, which is what this is. So if you could use this method or you could use this method, whatever you like, it works. Both methods work. Let's take a look at this one right over here. That means let's use the method where we have 1, 2, and the square root of 3, right? 1 times the square root of 3. Okay, so you could say 18 is to 2. As we went inside, as f is to 1, right? So that means 2f equals 18. If you divide by 2, so f equals 9. So now I know f equals 9. Now, that should be 9 times the square root of 3, right? Because if the short leg is 9 square root of 3. So, but let's do it this way just so you can see the relation, right? So now that I have 9, let's find out what g would be. So 18 is to 2 as g is to the square root of 3. Okay, so we have 2 times g is 2g. And then 18 times the square root of 3 is 18 square root of 3. Divide by 2 on both sides, so that g equals 18 square root of 3 divided by 2. Notice that 18 divided by 2 is 9, so g is 9 square root of 3. So again, so now I know that g is 9 square root of 3. And that's what g is. So either method works, guys. Either method works. Let's do another one. Here, example 5. Okay, example 5. Notice they gave me the long leg. Well, if I'm going to go with the formula from the formula chart, I'm going to go with this one down here, right? So x is across from 30. So I know this is my 30-degree angle. This is my 90-degree angle. So if this is my 30-degree angle, across from 30, I have x. Okay, across from 90, I have 2x. And then across from 60, I have, this is 9, but it will also be x square root of 3. That means these two numbers are the same, okay? So now I could solve for x. So if x square root of 3 is equal to 9, which is what this is, because 9 and x square root of 3 is equal to the same, I could solve for that. So remember that when multiplying or dividing radicals, you can only multiply outside by outside and inside by inside, which is what we did here, right? When we divided right here, 18 divided by 2. See, they're both outside. Okay, so you must also rationalize. So right now, we're going to divide by the square root of 3 on both sides. So divide by the square root of 3, divide by the square root of 3. So this makes 1, so that's x, equals 9 divided by the square root of 3. You must rationalize the denominator. You can never leave a radical in the denominator. So at that point, I would have to multiply by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. Now notice this will make it a perfect square because 3 times 3 is 9 and the square root of 9 is 3. So this is equal.
Good morning, teachers. At this time, please lock your doors.
I'm sorry about the announcements. Okay, so this will make it 9 times the square root of 3 is this right here. And this in the bottom is the square root of 3 times the square root of 3, which is the square root of 9. All right. So we have to simplify. So we have 9 over the square root of 3. And what is the square root of 9? It is 3. Now, what is 9 divided by 3? Remember, because you could only multiply outside by outside, or inside by inside, or when you divide, you do the same. Outside divided by the outside. So 9 divided by 3 is 3. So that means this is 3 square root of 3. So now x is 3 square root of 3. So that means this x is the same as 3 square root of 3. So I found out what b is. You see, because x and b is the same thing. So b is 3 square root of 3. Because these two numbers are the same, remember. And these two numbers are the same. Well, a is 2 times x. Well, I know what x is. X is 3 square root of 3. So that means a would be 2 times 3 square root of 3. Outside times outside. See, 2 times 3 is what? 6. So notice a is 6 square root of 3. So you only doubled the outside numbers because you're multiplying times the outside. So 2 times 3. You don't double this because that you cannot multiply that. That's an irrational number. That's why you leave it like that. This is a multiplication right here. This means 6 square root of 3 means 6 times the square root of 3. You just don't say the time. So there are your answers. B happens to be 3 square root of 3, while A is double the short leg, which is 6 square root of 3. And the long leg now is 9. Okay? Okay, so here is another example. It's example number 6. Remember, this is 60, this is 30 right over here, and this is my right angle. So I have the long leg. The short leg would be x. The long leg is always x times the square root of 3. Did you see something here? And then the hypotenuse is twice the short leg, so twice x. Okay, so these two numbers are the same, these two numbers are the same, these two numbers are the same. So 2 or x square root of 3 is equal to square root of 3. Notice that if I want to leave x by itself, I divide by the square root of 3. In here, I divide by the square root of 3. So notice this cancel, x equals 2. So now that I know x equals 2 and these two numbers are the same, well, n equals 2. And then what would m be? Well, 2 times 2, which is what? 4. So m is twice the short leg, which is 4. Pretty neat. So here is a shortcut. If you are going towards the hypotenuse, then remember to multiply by 2. If you're going towards the long leg, remember to multiply by the square root of 3. If you're going backwards, that means you're going to do this way, right? This way. You're going backwards. Well, since you multiplied by the square root of 3, remember to divide by the square root of 3. So you multiply to go that way, and you divide to go that way. Then from here to there, you multiply, and if you're going backwards, the opposite of multiplication is division, so you divide. So for example, here, I'm here. I want to go backwards, so I want to divide by the square root of 3. So if I take 3 square root of 3 and divide it by the square root of 3, that means y is 3. Now that I have y, I'm here. I want to go to the hypotenuse. I want to multiply. See, I want to multiply because I'm going in that direction. So I'm going to multiply by 2. So what is 3 times 2? 6. So notice it's double. See, let's do that again. Example number 8. Right here, I'm here. I want to go backwards. So I divide by the square root of 3. So 4 square root of 15 divided by the square root of 3. Notice inside by inside. So what is 15 divided by 3? Well, that would be 5. So that would be equals to 4 square root of 5. So now I know what V is. V is 4 square root of 5. Remember, this is my 90-degree angle right here. Now, to go from here to the hypotenuse, now I need to do what? I need to multiply by 2. So I take 4 square root of 5 and multiply that by 2. Outside times outside, that's 8. So that's 8 square root of 5. I'm done. Simple stuff, right? I'm at the hypotenuse. I'm here. I want to go back to the short leg, so I need to divide by 2. So if I take 6 square root of 3 and divide that by 2, remember outside by outside, so 6 divided by 2 is 3. So this is 3 square root of 3. That means the short leg right here is 3 square root of 3. Now, if I'm here and I want to go that way, I need to multiply by the square root of 3. So I take this number. Let me change colors.
Good morning.
Hold on. So I take 3 square root of 3 and multiply that by the square root of 3, which is 3 square root of 9. Well, the square root of 9 is 3, so that means it's 3 times 3, which equals 9. So that means x would be 9. Okay, let's take a look at this couple of example 10, this couple of exercises left. Let's see, they gave us 2 triangles, so let's take it up a notch. It says find x. They give me the short leg of a 30, 60, 90 triangle. Here is a 90-degree angle. Oops, right here. That's a 90-degree angle, and this is also a 90-degree angle, okay? So we have that. So if this is a short leg and I'm going to the long leg, I already learned that all I have to do is take this number, multiply it by the square root of 3. So that right there, that's 5 square root of 3. All right, so if I take this number and cut it in half, I will have the short leg of the next one, right? So if I take this number, because I'm going from the hypotenuse now of this triangle over here, this is triangle number 1, this is triangle number 2. So on triangle number 2, now I have the hypotenuse. If I'm going to the short leg, I must divide by 2. So I take this number and divide it by 2. I will get 5 square root of 3 divided by 2. Now, if I take this number right here and I want to go from here to the long leg of triangle number 2, I must take that number and multiply it by the square root of 3. So if I take that 5 square root of 3 divided by 2 times the square root of 3 over 1, because it's the same thing, right? Notice that 5 times the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is 5 the square root of 9. And the square root of 9 is 3. Okay, so let me write it down so you see what I'm saying. This is 5 square root of 9 over 2. What is the square root of 9? Well, the square root of 9 is 3. So this is 5 times 3 over 2. What is 5 times 3? That would be 15 halves. So 15 halves is x. So x is 15 halves. We've solved the problem. We've solved the problem. Okay, let's finish up. Mr. Kelly called Mr. Brush over to his house to move a box up some stairs to his second floor, like he saw how to do on The Big Bang Theory, using math. When they were finished, they wanted to see how far they moved it. They measured along the floor and realized the longer leg was 12 feet long. How far did they move it? Well, let's take a look at this picture right here. Let's figure out what they did. Okay, so they moved the box up the stairs. They want to know how far they moved it. We have a triangle right here. They measure along the floor and they found that that was 12 feet. Notice my right angle. This is a 60 degree right over here, and then we have my 30, 60, 90. A little battery slow here. Okay, so I want to go from the long leg to the short leg. All I have to do is remember that on the triangle, if you remember from before, we have 1, we have 2, and here was the square root of 3, right? So we're making that comparison. So here is the long leg. The long leg is the square root of 3. I'm looking for here, but I need this right here. So let's say y, this is 1, right? So 12 is to the square root of 3 as 12 is what they measure. Y is what I want to find out is to 1. So this is the square root of 3. So cross multiply. The square root of 3y is equal 12. Divide by the square root of 3, divide by the square root of 3. This cancels. Y equals, remember you cannot leave the radical in the denominator, so you must rationalize it. So you must multiply by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3, which leaves me with 12 square root of 3 over 3 times 3 is 9, and the square root of 9 is 3. So 12 square root of 3 over 3. You could still simplify that because notice outside. 12 divided by 3 is 4, so that means y is 4 square root of 3. Now, I have this short leg, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for this right over here. So from here, all I have to do is multiply that by 2. See that? Because I'm here right now, I multiply that by 2. So 2 times 4, that's 8 square root of 3. So basically, they moved it up that many feet. How much is that? Well, on the calculator, I already figured that out. 8 times the square root of 3 is 13.9 approximately. So they moved it about, what did I say? It was 13.9 feet. 13.9 feet. That's how much they went up, or they moved that box up the stairs. Okay, if you would please pause the video now, try these on your own, and then, you know, take a look at put the video back on and see if you did well. Okay, looking at this triangle right here, remember that here is the 30, 60, 90. All I have to do is go from the short leg to the hypotenuse. So going from the short leg to the hypotenuse, I will multiply this by 2. And 2 times 3 is 6. 6 square root of 3 would be my answer for that. That's how easy that is. And then going from the short leg to the long leg, I multiply by the square root of 3. And 3 square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is 3 times 3, which is 9. There you go. Now, here I have a triangle number 1, triangle number 2. They're both 30, 60, 90. Here is my right angle on this one, my right angle on that one. So I want to find x, which will be the hypotenuse to triangle number 1. So that's what I'm looking for right here, is the hypotenuse to triangle number 1. But before I find that, they gave me the short leg on triangle number 2. So going from the short leg to the hypotenuse of triangle number 2, that would be multiplying by 2. So that would make it 10 square root of 6. And then to go from the hypotenuse of triangle number 2, which happens to be the short leg of triangle number 1, going to the hypotenuse of triangle number 1, I just multiply times 2 again, which will make it 20 square root of 6. So therefore, what I have is that x is 20 square root of 6. Not hard. So now all you have to do is go to your class and practice. So I'll see you in class.